The Cuyahoga County Finance and Budgeting Committee meeting for Thursday, October 7, 2021 will come to order, and the clerk will please call the roll.
As a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county YouTube page. Calling the roll, Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Tuma,
Here.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Gallagher is absent at the moment. Mr. Shrine is absent at the moment. Ms. Brown?
Here.
Ms. Baker?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And do we have anybody signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one submitted any public comment.
And the next item on the agenda, number 4, is the approval of the minutes from the October 4th meeting. May I have a motion relative to those minutes?
So move, Brown.
Second, Baker.
It's been moved by Councilwoman Brown and seconded by Councilwoman Baker to approve the minutes from the October 4th meeting. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. Number 5, matters referred to committee. No legislative matters for this meeting. Our major item for the day is our update and discussion on the ERP system from our consultant, Zig Berzens. Welcome. Thank you for all your efforts. I see you prepared a substantial report for us, so I'm grateful for all the work that went into that, and please proceed.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for taking your time. I know you had some heavy-duty activity going on before. But this is the briefing regarding the progress and the status of the ERP project as of the end of September. So I'll talk to you kind of about the big picture first. So the overall progress, I think it's important to note that they actually are making progress and have for the last month or two because they kind of came into a stall 6 months ago. So it has begun starting to move forward. But unfortunately, what that stall has created is that they're now pushing up against the actual completion date. And so we'll talk about that. But the major activity that's going on right now is the first full parallel. They are including approximately 1,000 employees in that parallel test. That was for the pay period just recently completed. They are now in the process of actually processing the time records into the new payroll system at the same time that they're doing the old payroll system, so that over the next 3 to 4 weeks, they will be doing the analytical activity of comparing the two and identifying any kind of issues or disconnects or whatever the case may be in terms of the actual parallel results. They do expect to have that finished by the end of October. There has been a change in leadership. I think you may be aware of that. We have a new Chief Information Officer. He has, done his due diligence and is beginning to make some adjustments and changes in terms of his own organization, as well as the project team's organization. So that's the project progress. So some worrisome news. And I think I alluded to it just now in the fact that the critical path activities still exist in terms of actually bringing up payroll in January. So there's a series of steps that the team has to go through, and also that Infor has to go through. And what has occurred is that the plan for starting the new timekeeping system, which in theory should precede the payroll run in January, the team has indicated they probably won't make the 12/19 start. And that's the pay period, right? That's the pay period that's actually paid in January. So they're not going to make that. Now, clearly, if you continue to take the approach that the timekeeping system must precede the payroll system, you're immediately faced with, are they going to defer the payroll launch date? Okay. And, and that's, of course, a serious concern. The team seems to be fairly confident that if they decouple or basically break timekeeping from a project perspective, break it away from payroll, that they can then go forward and actually start the new payroll system just using the current timekeeping process, which is people most refer to as MyHR. You may have seen that. That they need to keep the current timekeeping process, and they'll just simply extract data from that, run it into the payroll system, and actually have a success in the sense of having payroll start in January. Okay, and that seems a very reasonable, very logical approach. Of course, what it does immediately is it puts in the question, well, what are you going to do about timekeeping? So we'll talk about that some more. The other thing I think we wanted.
So I'm going to break in for just a moment and share with my colleagues that I talked with Connie Geddes this morning, the new lead on the ERP, and she said that that a decision has not yet been made that we can't do WFM and payroll together on 1/1. Although from what we heard on Monday, I mean, it's obvious that the hurdles are very high, and it's a very challenging undertaking to try to do both, but I just want to make everybody aware that possibility has not been totally foreclosed yet. Please proceed.
There are some risks that the project team has continually identified in their weekly reports. The disappointing aspect of it, from my perspective, is that some of those risks keep sitting in there in that weekly report with no movement on trying to mitigate the risks. Particularly, one of them is the user interface, referred to as Mingle. Infor has made it very clear that it's supposed to be in place in October. A question that I have is, well, if it's not in place in October, which, oh, by the way, is now, what effect does that have on implementing the rest of the system? And don't really have an answer to that. Okay. There are some others that are risks that the team, I think, is aware, and they are working them. I think it's important that we see some weekly response with regard to the mitigation against those risks. And several of them have to do with the finance department making some decisions on how you want to go forward, because they're getting to the point where they are now recognizing some known differences between the old way of calculating and presenting paychecks and the new way. And so that needs to be resolved, and the finance department needs to make some decisions along those lines. mean, that's not an IT decision. Again, the overall overriding project risk, as I've said, is that if you continue to stretch out testing WFM and you get to the point where you can't launch on the 19th, okay, then you definitely, are impacting the payroll launch. And so that needs to get resolved. My understanding is that the team is committed to resolving that and identifying what the final decision is and what the impact is, what the revised schedule is going to be by the end of October, October the 29th. I would just simply bring to your attention that they are supposed to brief you on November the 4th. Would urge the team to be prepared to call the shot very specifically and identify what needs to take place going forward on the 4th. So, okay, I got to make sure, okay. The team continues to have staffing concerns. This is one of the reasons why WFM stalled a few months ago. They continue to have a resource shortage, specifically with knowledgeable people in the timekeeping solution, which is referred to as WFM. And that is continuing. They're working at it. I mean, that's great, but the point is that, it's a concern that they have brought up, and I certainly concur. And as you may recall, when I was asked, what do we need to do to make sure this thing goes? Well, one of them was you over-resource. And I think the team is still struggling with that, not only in terms of WFM expertise, but also we're faced with some significant change management activities, which is all about communicating known differences to 8,000 people. And that's something that has to happen over the next 3 months. There needs to be a focus on that. And so the team is short that resource, okay? So at least, in my opinion, the project team has reached another tipping point. It's the fifth one. I'm not convinced that they're going to be able to launch WFM on 12/19. If you look at it from the perspective of the sequence of events, they're working on a parallel run right now, and it's going to run all the way to 10/29. So they're going to run a second parallel. The duration for these parallels is right at 7 weeks. So if you start on payroll period 11/7, 7 weeks puts you right into the middle of December, which is a day or two before 12/19. What's missing is the user acceptance test for WFM, which is a task that's sitting out there. And 2 weeks ago, the team was very adamant that the user acceptance testing for WFM needs to follow the second parallel. Well, you start putting these things end to end, it's literally impossible to launch WFM on 12/19 for all 1,000 employees. Now, can you do a smaller version of that? Perhaps, but that's what needs to be presented to you on 11/4. So what kinds of things should the team consider? If they don't keep going with the plan the way it exists and they do not defer payroll, then you're faced with, okay, do we put in a staged approach to putting in WFM? Do we move WFM all the way into 2022 and decouple completely and say that for the next 6 months or so, we continue using the legacy environment to capture time and just defer WFM for a longer period of time? That becomes a contractual concern and discussion with Infor. Because at some point in time, Infor has a contract that says you are supposed to pay us so much money, and the end date on that contract is the end date of payroll. So what do we do about WFM? So in terms of some status things, we all get a copy of the weekly report. I have the one for last week, but the one that I worked with was the 9/24. And this is where the team actually came out and said we can't do 12/19. So but again, they had good news about the payroll implementation. So the parallel and what the activities that are going on. I've spoken with some of the people that are literally working on the parallel from the payroll perspective, and it seems to be very positive. So the team is very upbeat and very positive about, yes, they can run payroll in January. It's the time collection, time capture that is the concern. So furthermore, this is where we identify the risks. They're in that report. The team and I have a disagreement with regard to the perception of the overall status. The team likes to and wants to keep it and is reporting that the overall status is yellow, meaning that some issues are arising that may impact schedule. I'm sitting there thinking, well, if you can't make 12/19, seems to me like you have impacted schedule, and really it's time to put the red flag up. I mean, and that's kind of where I'm coming from, is that they probably should be telling us that the flag is up, it's red. They know that they're going to, well, I think they know they're going to come back and say, yeah, there's some things we can do, but the bottom line is we got to reschedule WFM. So, and we'll see, but that's kind of where I'm coming from. The right one here. I wanted to show you this. This is in the last report that the team typically includes a summary of the project plan in the weekly report. The bottom line is it's completely out of whack now. I mean, it's not meaningful. I mean, if you look at some of these target dates in here, they are months in the past. So there's very little here that is telling you where you are. So whether you reschedule WFM or not, they still need to redo the plan for the rest of the project. And I'm suggesting to them they need to come up with a sub-project detail starting in October 1 and take it through to the end of February when the post-go-live activities for payroll would be concluded, and of course show what you're going to do with WFM, with time collection, because this thing doesn't tell you anything anymore.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So clearly, you anticipate a delay in the project, which the administration doesn't seem to be in agreement or will acknowledge. So with the possibility of this delay, is there anywhere in your predictions, given the trends of the work that has been performed in the past, where you think they can land?
I think they have a very good shot of launching payroll as long as they are pulling data of time from the in-place legacy system. I think they have an excellent shot at doing that. Okay? They just simply have to figure out what to do with that new timekeeping system. I mean, conceptually, you could sit there and say, I don't ever want to use the timekeeping system, the new one, and I can continue that way for a long period of time. The downside of that is it starts affecting your legacy environment of how long you hang on to systems that are not being supported anymore, whether or not you have to hang on to some technology platforms to let that stuff keep running. So that's the downside. But the upside is, you get payroll started in January.
But only if they don't work with WFM.
Well, they need to confirm that, because we're at a kind of a minor disagreement there, and they're basically saying that on 10/29 they will know, okay? Because what they're doing right now is they are testing the extraction of information from the legacy environment in order to be able to prove that. That's what's going on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Baker?
Yes. Zig, are you in agreement with them that the 1,000 test and then another 1,000 test of the same group is adequate to know whether or not the 8,000, when it goes live, is, I was a little surprised that we were only going to sample 1,000 and stay at 1,000, and then we're going to resample and stay with the same 1,000. And I understand the rationale of, we've got all the different particulars in there, and if something fails, or is successful, that'll be a mirror of what the other 7,000 will show. But it does seem like you would do it at least one 8,000 test, or I know some of those are salary never changed, so maybe 7 of the 8,000, 6 of the balance, I guess.
We had conversations 6 months ago regarding what approach should be taken to identify who's going to participate in the parallels. Okay, I was suggesting stratified sampling. Okay, and that means that you would have different people in every parallel. It's stratified, which means that you go through by department and by union and all that kind of thing, and then sample the people out of that. It actually allows you to have less than 1,000, okay, in terms of quantities. The team at the time was, based on their conversations with their user group, were adamant that they needed to be very specific and that they really were unable to train different people. Therefore, if you train them once, then we'll use the same people. So they're pretty comfortable that they have it covered, all right? They're pretty comfortable, and that can work. I mean, I'm not suggesting that it can't. I mean, and it does appear that it is working, okay? I have looked at, the question that I raised was, if you use the same people, then you're going to use the same pay codes, which means that some of the pay codes may not get exercised. And so it seemed to me like you needed to know which pay codes were not exercised. And if you find out that there was only 2 out of approximate 1,000, pretty easy to address that. If it's 10, it's pretty easy to address that. If it's 500 out of 1,000, then you worry. You worry. So they are in the process of determining how many pay codes out of the 1,000 were exercised in this most recent run. And that's what they're working on. And then they've got to figure out, okay, well, if it's a significant number, then we've got to figure out how we're going to test those as well. How are we going to show that they will be executed properly? So that's a step that's sitting out there that I think they still need to resolve.
To me, it's a little concerning that there might be a couple of surprises in the 6,000 that we didn't test that just didn't show up in the sample, and of course we don't want any surprises when it comes to.
Well, yeah, you don't want any, but nothing's perfect either. I mean, you can parallel test from now until doomsday, and you'll still end up missing something. Yeah. The other thing I think we have to recognize is that the pay codes, the number of pay codes reflects your organizational changes. It reflects the new hires. All of those things are day-to-day activities that go on, which need to be reflected in your system and will be. So, you can sit here and say, well, I'm testing everything right now, but you may have a union contract change in February, and you've got to change them all again, or add 3, or whatever the case may be.
Thank you.
Okay. Shall I continue? Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. So This page is basically just talking about what the impact is that I've already described to you. When you start stacking up one parallel after the other, and then you've got the user acceptance testing coming after that, and that basically ends up pushing you beyond 1219. And as long as you make sure, as long as you say that's a dependency that payroll has to have, then you end up pushing payroll, which you don't want to do. The team, I've basically been reporting to you on a monthly basis the history of the weekly project reports. Like I said, I think overall we're an orange because I think there's a red flag for WFM. So that basically is what I'm telling you on this page, is that Zico's perception is that WFM will get rescheduled, and as such, it should be a red flag right now. Okay, and the other thing that yes, sir.
So on that point, let's assume it turns out the way you're projecting, which is probably the more likely, and what do you think would be a reasonable implementation schedule for them? How much additional time do you think would reasonably be needed to implement WFM?
If I were planning it, I would basically create a staged rollout of the new time reporting system, and I would start with a small group, a very small group, like council staff and the print shop. Okay, I'd start with a small group. I would break it apart by department, at 300 to 500 people, if you will, whatever the correct numbers are, and I would lay it out over 6 months. And I would do the most complex, the most difficult last, which is the sheriff. Because that's where you've got, not because it's the sheriff, but you've got people working 24-hour shifts, and you've got shift bonuses. I mean, you've got
The timekeeping is very complex.
Timekeeping is very complicated for them, and I would just simply do them last. And that's what I would lay out, and that means you're looking at, another 6 months.
Okay.
For timekeeping, not for payroll.
Not for payroll, right. Okay.
Okay? Continue?
Yes.
So that's the first I've heard. I thought that they were prepared perhaps for the second quarter to be ready with the WFM, but you think it's going to take at least 2 quarters?
If you stage it and spread it out, and realizing that, you everything in payroll is in 2-week blocks, right? In terms of the,
Right.
so you got the pay periods laid out, and then you got to sit there and say, well, I've got to do some hand holding after each pay period, or even, in fact, even during the collection of time. Got to be helping all these supervisors, because they're going to be approving time for the first time. So I'm back to saying, do you need a change management leadership? Absolutely you do, because the timekeeping is what touches so many people. And by the way, it's only 5,500 people. All right, there's 2,500 people, and I'm using rounded numbers, that don't use timekeeping or time reporting today. The data just goes straight in for payroll, and that would continue. Okay.
The lack of resources for the WFM, that also needs to be overcome
Yes.
in the next few months, I would think.
Yes, because right now, the positive thing was that last month, the team was able to find the original contractor that did the configuration of WFM. That's been a boon, because there were apparently some mistakes were being made by the other contractors, people, and they brought this original guy in, and apparently is doing a great job, which is good to hear. But as you go forward in 2022, you're not going to keep paying a contractor. You need to hire your own WFM expert, timekeeping expert. Does that make sense?
It does.
And I think the team understands that. I mean, it's just.
If I just may conclude, is the stabilization effort that really took the time of payroll, that seems to have taken a back seat because we needed to spend the time and energy on stabilizing the previous launches, is that concluded?
It's supposed to conclude at the end of October, as I understand it.
Confident that they are there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's gotten to the point where what is going on right now in stabilization is what is typically happens in any system that requires some maintenance and some small enhancements. I mean, it's normal operational stuff. So I see nothing wrong with basically saying, okay, we're finished with that. We're finished with that exercise. We have to have a maintenance and support team out there. They need to be responding to these things, and it shouldn't be the project team. Let the project team focus on payroll and timekeeping.
Right. Good. Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
So the team reports these arrows, and they're either green, yellow, or red. This is where, you know, we've got a disconnect. I think that WFM should be a red arrow going down. I mean, you know, the trend is down as opposed to up. But, you know, the point is that right now the reporting says everything is fine. I'm very nervous that the change management keeps saying everything is fine, we're rolling right along, and yet we don't have a change management leader. And we have got 3 months of very focused change activities, which means there's got to be a lot of communication to a lot of people. Okay? Project team also gives you a % complete every week, and I've been tracking it, and you know, my approach there is that if it's gotten better than the prior week, then it's green. If it, you know, and historically, we've had some situations where it's actually gotten worse than the prior week, and it's been red. Yellow just simply means that it hasn't changed. Well, if it hasn't changed, that means that there's no progress. So if you look at this, I mean, the only line that's meaningful is the line that says payroll WFM remaining. That's the remaining work. And you sit there and say, oh, well, we had some increased % complete in July. We had 3 weeks in August. But then at the middle of September, it became stagnant. Now, some of that is because the team decided to combine payroll and WFM. They used to keep it segregated, which was, in my opinion, the right thing to do. You know, now they're probably going to have to segregate it again, I would imagine. If you're going to decouple WFM from payroll, you're going to see it break apart. Okay? So the detailed project plan, and I just wanted to show this to you because, again, this is an indication of how the plan has not really maintained pace with what's going on. If you look at this and you see 4 parallels are listed, all right? Parallel 2 was the first full parallel, approximately 1,000 people. That's what's going on right now. They collected time for the pay period beginning 9/12. Now notice that, you know, they started in 6/8. The end date originally is 2 months ago, okay? And then you see parallel number 3, which is the second full parallel. You know, they have said to be determined for about 3 months. Now, what's the most likely start? If you finish by the end of October with parallel 1, the most likely start is the pay period beginning 11/7. If they don't begin 11/7, you move it by 2 weeks, right? Every pay period is moved by 2 weeks. So that would put it at Thanksgiving, right? Pay period, and then you add 7 weeks because they are pretty adamant that it takes 7 weeks from the start of the pay period to when they finish their analysis to do a parallel. And you can see how this thing is bumping up into December easily. This is part of the plan that needs to be redone. And they know that. I think, and I think you guys should be expecting that on 10/29 at your 11/4 briefing.
So,
Okay?
for everybody's information, we also have an 11/19 go, no-go date 10 days earlier. for launching the third parallel on 11/7. So that's going to be something to watch as well.
Absolutely. The other thing that needs to occur in this plan, which I have suggested to the team for 2 months now, is face up to the fact that you're not going to have parallel number 4. It isn't, the only way you can do parallel 4 is if you say, well, we're going to push our payroll launch to the beginning of February or March or whatever, then I can stick in another parallel. So financially, this is the chart that was presented to you Monday. You know, and no, it says, okay, here's the summary total. I thought it might be interesting for you to consider some of the reconciling items back to the original $21 million budget. Because that, you know, we're looking at 36.2. That's after an additional request for a little over $250,000 that is still to come to you. Okay? But it might be of some value for them to do a reconciliation so that you understand and they understand, everybody understands, how in the world do we get from 21 million to 36 million?
So I have to mention that I don't think the original 21 million accounted for the county labor, which is 7 million. It's not all in cost overruns. That accounts for a significant part of it.
I certainly agree. I mean, there's a few more reconciliation items because the 21 did not estimate everything that it probably should have. It was missing a few things. Some of it was technology. Some of it, exactly that, was it didn't really estimate for the internal charges.
Chair, if I may.
Yes.
On that same topic, though, we also did some descoping.
Yes, we have.
There was also some things in the 21 that aren't in there today.
Correct.
So I think we need to balance what those costs were compared to what the internal costs that weren't at the time.
So let's talk a little bit about the schedule. This is a restatement of the schedule that accompanies the weekly report every week. Okay, it's a restatement because the formatting is a little different. But the tasks and the number of line items and all that, that's exactly what the team has been working with. And I just wanted to highlight a few areas here. The number 1, if you look at number 1 up there, if you look at the bar, this thing was supposed to have been completed months ago. I mean, it says preparation for parallels. One would think that preparation for parallels precedes the parallel. Yet, preparation for parallels is incomplete. You know, to me, that's an anomaly. I mean, either it should be finished, or if there are some preparation things for a downline parallel, then it probably should be broken out and attached to the downline parallel, rather than misleading everybody and thinking that it's going to be complete at a certain date. Number 2, you know, and that's where we are right now, where we are in the process of finishing up that first full parallel, which is called number 2, and it's also footnote number 2. And you can see that it still has some time left on it to complete. Number 3 was supposed to start this month. Well, it hasn't started. It can't possibly. They're not going to do it until possibly the earliest, 11/7. And right now, that start date is October 1 in the plan. I mean, okay? And 4, you know, I make the comment, you know, why is it even there? All right? If we look at the next one, excuse me, I try to show you what some of the adjustments are that probably need to take place in that plan. So if you look at this, they're in blue, all right? And the message is The number one is the current payroll parallel that's going on. Well, it's not going to, we just have been told now several times it ends in October 29. Well, that's what that blue line does, is it moves all the way out to October 29. Okay, that's what's happened. That's in the real world, that's what's happening with that parallel. If you look at the next parallel, you know, the work with preparing and all that kind of thing and so forth was planned to be well before. And now you see the blue is actually lined up with November, the beginning of November. I mean, that's what it's going to look like. And if you look at that, you start realizing, oh, this is where you see that everything starts pushing against that November 12/19 date. It's when you actually start seeing it. Okay, and you see the X in there. That's got to come out. If you add that and stack it up behind the second full parallel, you're going to be in January, late January. All right? So these are some things that I've been talking to the team to just say, you need to be, if you're going to redo this plan, something like this has to happen. And instead of continuing to show, 6-month-old dates that are absolutely meaningless, which is what's in the plan right now. So this is kind of recapping what the impact is if you reschedule. So you're basically saying we'll still get two full parallels in, that we're going to probably have to stretch out the user acceptance testing for WFM. In order to launch payroll in the beginning of January, we got to segregate WFM, the timekeeping, from payroll. Okay. And then I got a reminder here at the bottom, which is basically to say, don't forget about budget formulation. The Office of Budget Management has to provide you with a quarterly budget report, and that report includes FTEs. Well, the source of the FTEs is the timekeeping system. Okay, so if you're going to use the source of WFM, you got to realize that the BFM, that particular interface is not going to be ready for quite a while. And they will continue to use the manual approach that they're doing now. Fuzzy targeting, we've talked about this. I'm just reminding us, as you said, Congressperson Baker, the council originally approved, something that they thought they were going to get, and it was a lot of modules, and it included a lot of things that, over time, it's kind of been chipped away at the overall picture. And I'm going to show you that picture a little bit later, but it has been chipped away, and you're not getting what you thought you were going to get in terms of what you paid for. Okay. So let's talk about conclusions. I think the team has reached another tipping point, and it's the 5th one over the last 5 years. And those tipping points have been in 6-month increments. It needs to be, the team needs to be able to tell you if they keep WFM coupled with payroll, then you're gonna push payroll out. If you decouple, you can keep payroll in, and you can basically say, I get new paychecks in January. And then of course, as soon as you start spreading things out, your dollars are going to go up again. I mean, if the team says, okay, fine, we'll stage WFM over 3 to 6 months, I think 6, in 2022, they're going to come back and ask for more money. You have seen this chart. This is the chart that we created 3 years ago. And it's the picture of ERP. That's the picture. It's summarized, and it doesn't have all the details, but it gives you the picture of the major modules that are included in what you basically, appropriated funds for. So that's the picture. And then Congresswoman Baker related to, have we already carved some things out? And the answer is yes, we have. So you see some X's here. Expense management got carved out. Okay? CRM pilot, was never part of it. It was something that Infor provided the software at no charge. It got piloted at HHS, and apparently that's going to get replaced. Okay? If you look at this X in the middle, you see Public Works Asset Management. The product is Enterprise Asset Management. A component of that product is work orders. That got implemented 3 years ago, successfully. Okay, the rest of it got carved out. It's kind of not on the horizon of the project. Okay. So, and then you'll notice I've got some fractions in here. So it's just a reminder that, budget, we never got that part 3, which is the FTE calculation. And that's what we just talked about that. And talent management has five or six sub-modules or components, however you wish to look at it. Only one has been implemented, which is talent acquisition. So people can go online and apply for jobs. Okay. The rest of it's sitting there, and I got carved out. So now what we're looking at, okay, the tan-colored X's are the ones we just talked about, okay? But if the team decouples WFM from payroll, you're carving out something else. I mean, you're carving out workforce management, which is the blue X near the center. And on the far top left-hand corner is time reporting, which is part of WFM. Okay? And then you're still looking at finishing up BFM, which is the 2/3 there. And, Harris hasn't completed, so you're not going to get the interface to the new source of revenue until that completes. So right now, you're using the old legacy system for that.
And if you could go back just a minute.
Sure.
The blue X on the very bottom, are you saying that the data lake process that didn't go through?
The data lake activities, to my knowledge, have stalled. They are picking it up again. My understanding is they're picking it up again, and the whole idea is to get the history converted, okay? And so it's a concern. I'm bringing that up only that it's a question that I want to ask in follow up as to whether or not that's going to make it, and in relationship to the rest of the project, because it's not in the project plan. None of that history stuff is in the plan, and it should be.
Okay, well, thanks for bringing that back to our attention. That is important.
It is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, so replanning phase 1 is what's left. I mean, everything else has been carved out, so phase 1 is what's left. So, what historically has happened is the project plan, the master plan, has had some top-down activities where the schedule has been forced into the high-level line items, ignoring the lower-level line items. And so I think it's important that when we replan this, that the plan needs to be cohesive, it needs to show its appropriate links and dependencies, and certainly it also, and I think there's definite agreement with some of the new players now between myself and what level of detail should be in a plan. The plan that we've been working with is in my mind relatively summary. Even though it has 3,000 line items, it probably needs 4,000. Okay, and I have for a long time been a proponent of the tasks need to be with a short enough horizon that the people doing the tasks can see the end. Now, what is that? I mean, I think it's a week, all right? Others think it may be a day. but the point is, it's more detailed than parallel 2. And the example that I was talking about with one of the team members yesterday is if you take parallel 2, the one that they're working on, or will work on, okay? The line item says parallel 2, 7 weeks. There it is. Okay, that's it. So if you're weekly sitting there trying to figure out what percent complete you are, you sit there and guess somehow. Or you assume the duration is the right way to do it. So the collecting time for 2 weeks is 2/7, and you calculate 2/7, and there's your percent complete. But the point is you can have a task in the plan as a subtask underneath parallel, and it's week 1 of time collection, week 2 of time collection, dead week. There's a dead week of about a week. And then you have 4 weeks of analysis. Well, what are you analyzing? Week 1, you analyze the time. Week 2, you analyze the pay. Week 3, you analyze the check. Week 4, you summarize everything. That's what I would do. But that way, every week, all you do is tick off that it's done. It becomes very simple if you do that, okay? Takes a little administrative work, but it's pretty simple. So that's what I'm suggesting here in the replanning the phase 1. The bottom statement in there, it says, use sub-projecting. I've recommended this for 3 years. Here's a chance for maybe the project team will actually do that. Set these things up as sub-projects, and that gives them a lot more flexibility. You can move the sub-projects around. You can link the sub-projects when you have a critical path crossing sub-projects. That stuff works. So specifically, I think the things that you should be looking for on November 4th, you need to make sure that it covers at least the next 3 months. You should certainly be seeing a milestone for payroll being run for the first checks in January. Now, the next 3 that I list there are, I don't know which way the team's going to go. So either you're going to continue working as you were told by Connie, and you're going to say, fine, I need a plan for that. So all I'm suggesting is, for sure, you need to segregate WFM from payroll so that you have those segregated out and you can see them. And then you can go with a staged rollout, or, and then you've also got this whole business of finishing up the labor budgeting, which needs to be shown as well, which has historically been overlooked. Okay? The team has already asked you, or is planning on asking you for another $250,000. Certainly if you stretch out WFM, it'll probably require some more funding as well. Okay? And, then I kind of remind everybody that, if the team needs to come to a decision, are you going to implement the rest of Infor or not? I mean, you've got WFM. Are you going to do that or not? Are you going to do expense management? Are you going to do compensation management? Are you going to do the other 3 softer HR modules that are out there, which is performance management of employees, goals management, those kinds of things, okay? But, if you're not, call it, make a decision so you don't continue to worry about something that's very fuzzy. And lastly, shortly, the team and the county is going to have to decide what to do about version 11. Version 11, let me skip ahead just real quick here. This chart should be familiar. We've talked about it. I mean, this is the whole story. Version 11 is what's circled up there. That's the Lawson product that is integrated with everything else by Infor. And version 11 replaces that Lawson product because it's very dated technology. Version 11 has been around for years. It's not a surprise. It's just that that's not what the county acquired 6, 7 years ago. All right? Infor has told me that it is a re-implementation. So in essence, you're looking at the entire financial suite, replacing it all, okay, with whatever the new solution is, and it's called version 11. Just wanted you to kind of tune into that. It doesn't mean you're replacing payroll necessarily, or timekeeping, or HR, but the financial suite.
Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I could be wrong, and maybe I just don't have the language correct, but I think when we asked the question, what about the next version update, we were told that was 3 to 5 years away from now. So is that the same, is that the same answer, or is that different? It sounds like you're saying it's next year, and they're saying it's maybe in 2025.
I think it depends on how much of the current solution you want to try to get in. Okay, if you take the next 2 years to do WFM, to do expense management, compensation management, finishing up your history migration, which is the data lake issue. If you do all that and it takes you 1 to 2 years, then you'll be ready. Like it or not, I mean, a lot of people say, well, once you implement something, you like to use it for a while. What you've got is older. I mean, it's dated already. I mean, so does it make sense? It probably makes sense to be real serious about that version 11 in terms of what it will do for you, and possibly even looking for a different product. And when you think about it, I mean, 80% of your Infor has been in place for several years now, actually.
What is the learning curve when you change and move up to the next version? Is that once you have one in place, say it's running well, everyone understands it, may not have had a long time to prove itself, but you have people in place and it's running well. Is the next version a whole retraining, or is it just maybe updating?
The next version of Infor should not be.
Okay.
In other words, the user interface should be, most likely would be, similar. If you swap out for a different vendor, you got a whole new story.
Why would we do that? I wouldn't think we would do that.
I'm just saying it's a possibility. The major organization here in town that runs Infor is replacing Infor. Okay.
Can I just ask, what kind of cost are we looking at when you?
For version 11? The conversations that I had 2 years ago with Infor is $2 to $3 million. That was consulting services time.
Thank you, Chair.
So you're clearly saying that version 11 was around well before we started this process.
That's my understanding.
Do you have any understanding why we didn't go with version 11 right out of the gate as opposed to starting with a system that was already outdated?
I really don't know. I don't have any idea what the selection process was about. At least in terms of experiences in other situations, organizations have been known to select version X minus 1, meaning the one right before, typically if it's significantly less in cost. Because whatever the most recent Cadillac version tends to cost more.
Well, I know I do that or more when buying an iPhone, but it's just not the same.
Yeah. One likes not to get the Microsoft version 0 You get 0.1. Yeah.
You know, I just, I just really wonder why we set ourselves up for needing a version upgrade soon after we're gonna get the first one done.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So I specifically remember asking this question because of the rate of speed in which software advances, and the response, I think, was to the effect that it would not have made significant changes, but we are so far beyond the implementation date that we were originally scheduled for that probably has a significant impact on why this version is so far outdated. So that was a question that was presented early on, is how quickly and what would be the ability to maintain upgrades and advances in technology, because technology changes really fast and this project is moving extremely slow. So I think it's just a combination of the two. So thank you.
You bet. You know, sometimes changing to another version is forced on you merely by the fact that the software vendor won't support the old one. You know, and then you got to make a decision as to, am I going to struggle along with my own baling wire, or am I, you know, or do I go ahead to the next version? You know, many software vendors are pretty quick to do that kind of thing to force you to upgrade. Shall I continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. Let's see here. So just wanted to kind of highlight a few longer term activity. You're going to be getting a briefing in November, and then I think in December, the December briefing would be one where you could expect and should expect the team to give you a better financial picture. Okay, I mean, I think since they're probably focused on the replanning in your November briefing, I think the December briefing makes sense for you to say, I want the full picture. You know, I mean, I would think that's what you want. Okay, so that's what I basically talk about here, and the other thing that I've been kind of pushing several folks on, and that is, I don't understand why the IT department does not present you with a capital plan. I mean, Public Works does, but there's no reason why the IT department can't present you with a capital plan. And there are still some things hanging out there that might more likely become a capital project. If you say, oh, I'm going to upgrade to version 11 3 years from now, well, that's no different than Public Works saying, well, we're going to rebuild this bridge and it's going to be in 2029 or, you know, whatever the time frame is. It seems to me like that makes a lot of sense, and it would help the county get a picture of where it needs to go with regard to appropriations and funding for more significant items.
Chairman?
Yes.
Along those lines, I don't mean to cut you off, but it's a good talking point. I think that's actually a very worthwhile endeavor to request from IT a capital plan, so we have an idea what we're doing moving forward. And I would venture to guess that the reason we probably haven't gotten that, or that's not been on the agenda, is because of the change in leadership at the top so often in that department. The Public Works, with Mr. Dever, we've had stability, we've had leadership, and we have a direct communication with them. Whereas IT, it's not been the case always with council. So, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that we do get something from IT so we can properly plan, because oftentimes the capital projects aren't necessarily the services that have to come with those, you know, and we get a figure for one thing, but we don't get a figure for another thing. And really moving forward, we should have an understanding as to what it is that we're looking at, you know, cost-wise. So I thank Zig for bringing that up. Thank you.
So we will discuss the 5-year capital plan in the budget process very shortly. So we'll make sure that we have them respond.
That's fine. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So the last time we talked, I think Councilperson Baker, I think you brought up benefits. So one of the things that I think, that the team and you should be paying attention to on a going forward, longer term basis is to be looking at this project from a total cost of ownership perspective. Okay, what is this thing really going to cost us for the next 10 years, right? And it's at this point that you see this model. And I have shown you this model before, and I've shown it to the team, basically saying, sure would be nice if you could figure out your payback. When do the benefits get at least close to what we're spending? Okay, I mean, we're not looking to make a profit here, but at least it ought to pay for itself. Now, the model says, if you look at the model, it's at the very bottom, it says, I've got out-of-pocket cost savings. Example is if I get rid of the mainframe, I got out-of-pocket money, cost savings. Cost avoidance. Public Works had a significant amount of cost avoidance numbers in their estimate 3 years ago, I think. Okay, but that's because they were going from manual preparation of work orders to automated. Productivity improvement, and then you add all those up and you get cumulative benefits. And then the top line is kind of the total cost of ownership over time, which includes the 1.5 million license fee and services contract for Infor, as an example. It just keeps adding up over 10 years, right? So you should see a picture like this. But that means that it's time now. I mean, pretty much a good portion of the system has been in for quite a while. The financial components, by next spring, the financial components will have been in for about a year, an operating year. Purchasing, accounts receivable, et cetera, general ledger. The logic or the representation that was provided to you 2.5, 3 years ago on benefits was, we have to wait for the system to get in before we can tell you. Well, I think the system's pretty close to being in. It's probably now time to say, let's get those numbers updated. I mean, let's get some real numbers and let's find out, do we have some payback on this thing? Okay?
Chair, if I may ask a question on that.
Yes, you may.
So, yes, of course, we need to find out after all this, why we, first of all, went in, which of course we couldn't exist on a legacy system. So, I mean, there is a no-brainer there. But then there's also, what is the return on investment? So we understand Public Works, that's easy. They never had it computerized, so going from zero to efficiency should show us that that is in fact a good cost savings. But how do you measure the other departments? And from what it looked like in the last update that we had, we need to fill some significant slots. I mean, we need some high payroll people still not yet hired, and eliminate the contractors that we had to bring in because of that. How do you gauge these other departments factoring in the higher payroll versus the efficiencies and the cost savings of what we've done?
There's no question that the departments could use some advice and counsel regarding what approach makes sense in terms of generating benefits. I think the county, in terms of not only the executive, but yourself as well, the legislative, is to truly buy into and understand the various components of benefits. I mean, everybody, finds it easy. Oh, we reduce 2 staff. Okay, so I save the salaries of the staff. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Everybody gets it, and we all know there's a tremendous reluctance, to do that. But what about cost avoidance? What about, remember, if you're looking at this thing from a 10-year perspective, and you say to yourself, well, if the population is going to increase X, and we're supposed to provide services to X as it increases, does the system allow you to maintain your staffing levels without having to hire more because the population just went up 20% or 25% or whatever the case may be? That's an example. I'm not saying that's the answer, but it's an example of, figuring out cost avoidance. But it requires you to use analysis, it requires you to use estimating. It's not black and white, okay? But again, what's is your purpose here return on investment, or is it really, because to me, that's a business item. Okay, am I making money? Return on investment. But payback, did I generate enough information to at least pay for this thing? To me, seems reasonable, and it doesn't have to have black and white, we saved 10 people, or we let 10 people go, or early retirement. That's another approach, right? You get some early retirement. So I think they could use a little help going along with that, and they ought to be able to present to you what model they're going to use so that you buy into it. Like productivity improvement. People simplistically hear productivity improvements. Oh, people work faster. I think people don't necessarily work faster. They work more effectively, or efficiently. You can use that term. So they're getting more output for the same amount of input, because, we're not in an assembly line where people are doing the same motion all the time, right? But, those are things I think that could help the department directors, in terms of what the avenue they want to take in identifying those benefits.
You just, for example, measure the amount of services that you provide,
Sure,
3 or 4 years from now versus the amount of services you could provide.
absolutely.
And then the cost of those services have not increased, but you're servicing more.
Additional services. So you're getting more output for the input, which is the labor. More effective, more efficient, there's a variety of ways of looking at that. But absolutely, because what is it that the county does? The county provides services to the people that live here. That's what it does. So absolutely, it makes all kinds of sense.
Okay, good. It's good. Thank you.
Okay. Whoops. Questions?
We've been kind of doing them as we go along, but I would look to my colleagues and see if we have any other questions. To my mind, the most important one, because it seems like it's a likely course of action, is whether it in fact is reasonable to separate out payroll and WFM, and you've already said that you believe that makes sense and is doable. So that's good to hear.
Okay.
And I very much appreciate you're looking at a little farther down the road, because I think right now the administration is focused heavily on just getting through the next couple months, and that's very understandable. There's a lot to be said for that. We'd like to get some significant pieces behind us, but we can't lose sight of those longer-term questions as well. So I appreciate you keeping those on our radar screen.
Councilman Miller.
Yes, Council President.
If they decide to separate out and timekeeping is decoupled, repeat again, how much time do you think it would take to complete the timekeeping after?
Well,
and is there a dollar amount that you might think is related?
I have no idea what the dollar amount might be, and I'm trying to be, in terms of my estimate, which I mentioned earlier, which is probably 6 months. Can it be done in 3? Probably. But the track record of the team and its ability and the concerns about the change management activities, the training activities, I think the whole thing is going to drag a little bit. So, yeah, I would think it's 6 months. I mean, from whenever you start, and how you, and it's also going to be dependent on how you stage it, how you break it apart and group various employee groups together. I mean, do you do it by union contract, or do you do it by organizational entity? I mean, there's a variety of ways to do that they would need to figure out. But I'm thinking that, I would look at it as a 6-month deal. Will there be more need for paying contractors? Probably, unless the team is able to cherry pick from this organization that's replacing Infor, which is a place where you can get some resources, presumably. Then it's they're going to pay for contractors, and it's just going to take longer. I mean, so you're going to have because right now the contractors are for WFM. Their agreement is the end of the year. Right? That's what's included in the current budget, and that's what's included in the additional funds that they're talking about asking for. So if you start pushing this thing out into the first 6 months of 2022 for timekeeping, you're probably going to want to keep at least one of those contractors around, right? And that contractor, if it continues to be at the current rate, you might be able to get it for less, but if it continues at the current rate, you can easily calculate 160 hours a week or a month times that rate, which is over $200 an hour, and multiply it out for 6 months, and there's your number.
Thank you.
Ms. Baker.
In addition to that, we have some significant vacancies that also have slowed us down, and the resources we were told has really compromised our ability to move forward. So does that play into the ability to launch payroll at the time that they're hoping decoupled? And does that also hamper us for the first 6 months out of next year if we're not able to fill those vacancies?
The bulk of the resource needs are WFM related. Bulk. I mean, not all, but the bulk. I mean, that's the one that has required the most complex, detailed knowledge of the product. Like I say, payroll is pretty well squared away, and they've already got an internal person that's been hired. Now, should there be a backup for that person? Probably, right? But it's WFM where there's a shortage, and right now the reliance is almost entirely on contractors. And there's also the ERP administrator position they still need to fill, which is the position that we lost 4 months ago. Still haven't filled that one, although I understand that they're talking to some people it's a very positive situation right now. So that's good news.
But does that, is that critical to their estimation as to whether or not they can get WFM launched and ready to go by June of next year?
Well, yeah, you have to have some WFM expertise. Now, whether it's contractor or whether it's an employee, I mean, if it's a contractor, then it's going to be X dollars more than the salary cost associated with an employee. And then but the employee is going to be charged to the project as it should, but afterward, that becomes part of operational costs. So the folks today that are working on stabilization, they're part of the operating budget. They're not part of the project. And certainly at the end of January, give or take, people who are working on the project for payroll actually then become part of the ERP support team. I mean, they become part of the operating budget.
That's all good.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, and just for everybody's information, we have one additional session like this scheduled. It's on Monday, November 29th. It will include both the administration and ZIG at the same time. not, not my preferred way of doing it, but scheduling concerns made that the way that works. So mark that down, and on a week from Tuesday, when we find out about the November 7th second parallel, I will let everybody know. I don't think we can even do payroll on January 1 unless we start the second parallel on November 7th. So that's a very important decision point. So, and we'll keep you posted when we get the update on October 29th as well. Anybody else have anything else? Thank you very much for your diligence and service, and we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Any
Thanks, Sue.
miscellaneous business? Hearing none and nothing else holding our attention, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.